In light of baby daddy Jesus blessing us with yet another Transformers movie that actually looks kinda good, maybe, I decided to watch every single Transformers movie and rank them. Please send help. Over 16 hours of giant robot cars punching each other has crippled my mind beyond belief. My 2 remaining brain cells have called a ceasefire and decided to finally work together for this video. Watching over 1,000 minutes of Michael Bay made me realize that God does give his greatest battles to his strongest warriors. And I, for one, am...
I'm tired, boss.
But without further ado, go ahead and call for help. Optimus! Sexualize women, and let's get straight into it. The first and worst movie in the franchise, Transformers: The Last Knight.
Feelings, what, I've come here to be insulted by some overeducated Ivy Tower princess in a stripper dress?
Transformers 5 was the last official movie in the Bayverse, before the franchise inevitably crashed and burned. This movie showed us just how desperately we needed another director in the series. Michael Bay was so mentally checked out of this movie and seemed to hit his most desperate point of trying to pick up the pieces and put this franchise back together. He very famously did not want to make a 5th or even a 4th entry. And my God, just like LeBron, he shouldn't have.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
There is certainly a lot to criticize about this movie, and it's the most hated in the franchise for more than one reason. The Last Knight was a really bad product of the time.
You are simply bad product.
At some point, Paramount completely lost sight of what this franchise was meant to be, and instead went in a completely other direction. Transformers would become the MCU. And yes, this is as stupid as it sounds. This movie was meant to kickstart a long series of sequels that would have opened a vortex in the space-time continuum and killed us all. By the time 5 hit theaters, everyone was just so sick and tired of Transformers. Or at least so we thought, because in reality, what we were sick of was Michael Bay. Bumblebee and Rise of Beasts are actually some of the best in the franchise, and who knows, if Paramount would have swapped directors every movie or every couple movies, maybe this really could have turned into something. A spiritual successor to the MCU, because no one has ever tried that. But before I roast this movie into insanity, I'm going to give you the parts that I enjoyed the most. Anthony Hopkins, John Turturro, Lennox. Anthony Hopkins is perhaps the best part about this movie and the best character, but that's not really saying a whole lot when you see the competition.
I don't sell out friends.
His character only exists to exposit the plot and thicken up the runtime. He's the last surviving member of the Order of the Witwickens, because you, there's a secret Illuminati order now. The Witwickens have been around for millennia, since the days of King Arthur and Merlin the Wizard.
Hey, Professor, I'd do anything for an A.
Someone thought it would be a pretty swell idea to introduce the brain-dead concept of Transformers Medieval Knights. John Turturro, Lennox, the Italian Bot, and General Shepard are a clear attempt of Bay and the writers to sort of go back to basics, which, after seeing this My Little Pony jar, was a huge step in the right direction. However, this was the only attempt to go back to basics, because this plot is so overcomplicated, it makes Lost look about as deep as Peppa Pig. So now the world hates Transformers. They're illegal.
But we have some bad hombres here, and we're gonna get them out.
Even though they have single-handedly defeated every Decepticon invasion for the last 10 hours of my life that I will never get back. They're being actively hunted by everyone for no fucking reason. Because Attinger died in the last movie. and he was the only one that was killing off the Autobots for KSI. Mark Wahlberg lives in a bombed-out Chicago, where he becomes the spiritual successor of Ratchet. He finds a ship with a knight that crash-landed in Chicago, and if you want to know why there's a giant Transformer knight flying around, f*** you. These Transformers knights are later revealed to be refugees who are hiding from Quintessa, and they've been on Earth for thousands of years. So what the fuck was this guy doing? Was he going to Dunkin'? To 7-Eleven? Who shot him down? Why the fuck is he flying around?
You must have no end of questions, Guardian.
If you're as confused as I was, have no fear, Robert is here. He is flying around looking for Mark Wahlberg to give him a reason to be in the plot.
Let me explain.
Vivian Wembley is the key to everything. She is the only one who truly knows where the staff is that they're looking for. She is the only one that can get there because she alone can activate the sub that'll get you there. And she's the only being in the universe that can wield this absolute power. So what the f*** is Mark Wahlberg doing here?
What was the plan then, genius? Huh?
I don't know.
You don't know. You know why you don't know? Because you don't think. That's why. You don't think. You never figured out how to think.
They give us some bullshit explanation that the talisman is gonna lead them to the staff. But then the movie just lies upon itself.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
You could take Marky Mark out of the entire movie, and the only thing that would change is now I wouldn't want to Hannah Baker myself. But by far, the absolute rock bottom of this classic modern day masterpiece is the fucking aspect ratio. For some unholy reason, Michael Bay decided to shoot on none other than 8 different fucking aspect ratios for the entire movie. And this isn't unheard of for directors to do this. Maybe sometimes in like a chase scene or an action scene, directors will often change over to, say, IMAX to give you a better scope of what's going on. Michael Bay, on the other hand, reached peak who gives a shit and just used all the ratios in all the scenes together. Dude, you just get like these massive black bars that just come in and obstruct the entire screen. And they couldn't even be bothered to fix this shit in the trailers. By the final fight, I can't even keep up with this shit. I actually had to take breaks from this visual assault because Bay doesn't give a rat's ass about me or this movie. And almost as criminal is the blatant false advertisement, not just for this movie, but for several others in the franchise. Like, this was branded as, ooh, Optimus is bad, Optimus is evil, rethink your heroes. It takes him damn near 2 hours to even show up to the movie, and just like a true DC fan, within the first 5 minutes of the fight, he saves Martha. I don't know why, but lying to the audience is apparently just a staple of this series. The Dinobots, the Fallen, Nemesis Prime. It's a cheap gimmick to get your fat ass to sit down and pay for this movie. And I did. Every single time. But I gotta reel myself in a little bit. The editing is choppy and amateurish, the writing is ridiculous and convoluted, and it absolutely did not need to be almost 3 hours long. For this and 1,000 other reasons, Transformers: The Last Knight is unironically dead last. Unfortunately, however, we are not done with Marky Mark and his Funky Bunch.
I'm an inventor. This could be a game changer for me. If I can apply that technology to my invention,
Even though it's beyond better than 5, it's more like saying that a pound of shit is better than a metric ton of shit. This one was the first where you really started to feel the age of the franchise. 4 tried to become something new, something fresh, something hip. Sam Witwicky is done. He's out. He's gone. Matter of fact, he's fucking dead. Yeah, remember when they killed off the core human character of the franchise? I didn't. Cade Yeager is now the star. And no, I did not make up that name. He's a failed inventor living with his daughter, just trying to make ends meet. By pure coincidence, he happens to buy an old truck that just happens to be Optimus Prime. In order to protect Optimus, Cade and his family are now on the run, hiding from the CIA, who are hunting down the Autobots. That sounds like a kick-ass plot for a Transformers movie. However, Michael Bay, being Michael Bay, took this great concept and turned it into 2.5 hours of nothing but suffering.
I did it for me. I liked it.
By far, the biggest mistake that was made for this movie was Mark Wahlberg. He is so horrendously and unequivocally miscast for this movie. And this is coming from someone who likes Mark Wahlberg, unlike a certain Vietnamese man. If you are baffled, starstruck, and flabbergasted as to how this casting decision ever came to be, look no further than the highest grossing film of all time, the critically acclaimed Pain and Gain.
Know why habit rhymes with rabbit? Because your whole life disappears down a bunny hole.
This is art, Mr. White.
Apparently, Paramount wanted Michael Bay so bad for this next entry that they wound up funding Pain and Gain. You know, the movie that Michael Bay actually wanted to make. Starring, you guessed it, Marky Mark.
I mean, that's what great inventors do. Because you're an inventor like me.
I'm an inventor.
Put 2 and 2 together and Michael Bay beats you up and takes your lunch money. Sadly, Bay is not the only person that would use this movie as active blackmail. Geoflix Enterprises, which is a major media corporation in China, entered into an agreement with Paramount to co-produce this movie. This came with a lot of strings attached.
In case you haven't noticed, you've fallen right into my trap.
Instead of having the final showdown be in Detroit or Chicago, which was the original idea, the final showdown would now be in China. And not just any part of China, but Shanghai. A city that absolutely must be defended by the central Chinese government.
We gotta call the central government for help.
And look, propaganda is natural to come out in any movie. Hell, this franchise itself was built on military propaganda. But this is just so obnoxious and out of place and obvious, it's just cringe. All the Transformers just really seem to hate each other now. They're constantly arguing, fighting, going back and forth, and it just feels really bitter, like the vibes are really negative around them. It seems the only reason that they're together now is to survive, and not because they're an actual family, which I don't know, just seems like the antithesis of what the Autobots are. Even so, they are leagues better than what this movie thinks is entertainment, which is Marky Mark, a bag of sand, and Dan Schneider's #1 fan. These 3 idiots have about as much chemistry as China and John Cena. And the most important one, which is meant to be Cade's daughter, is the most pathetic of the lot. She is played by Nicola Peltz, who has about as much talent as a slice of bread. But hey, who am I to judge? Because without her, we never would have gotten what I consider to be the pinnacle of Hollywood filmmaking. This scene right here.
I just called the cops on you because this is illegal. She's a minor.
We're protected by the Romeo and Juliet laws.
We dated for a little while. I was a sophomore and he was a senior. It's fine.
No, it's not fine.
We've got a pre-existing juvenile foundational relationship. Statute 2705-3.
What? Texas statute? Is that a real law?
Over 123 years of filmmaking have all led to this, where several billion-dollar production studios approved, funded, edited, and worldwide released this scene, where a full-grown man explains in excruciating detail why he can cream and shuffle a 17-year-old girl and get away with it. This movie was doomed from the beginning and severely impacted the franchise moving forward. Bay was out of fucks to give at this point, and the blood this movie spilled on the franchise just couldn't be washed off anymore. For what it's worth, this movie really could have worked. But alas, I think it earned its rightful place as number 6. The next one is a movie that you might have already guessed is pretty far down the list. Transformers 2: Revenge of the Fallen. Just a few seconds ago, you heard me say that Transformers 4 was doomed from the get-go. However, this one actually was. This movie was infamous for having the most terrible script in the series and going through some major production hell. Production of the film was scheduled to be right around the 2008 writer's strike, which put Michael Bay at a humongous disadvantage. And by the time they actually began shooting, they didn't even have a script. The writers, who got paid no less than $8 million, had to lock themselves in a room for 2 weeks and come up with the skeleton of a script to sort of give Michael Bay a general direction. Bay himself then came up with a 9,000 IQ play and just wrote the script himself. 60 pages of script himself. This leads to an unnatural phenomenon that I like to call way too much Bay. There are a total of 12 sex jokes, 6 MacGuffins, 5 upskirt shots, and 3 or 4 of whatever the hell this is.
How do you know it's gonna work?
Because I believe it.
Not to mention that the Bayhem Master himself couldn't even be bothered to keep up with his own movie from 2 years ago.
Let's kill these things.
Soxon Forward Operations Base in Qatar was attacked. There were no survivors.
It's going after the files! Get the hardlines!
Psych! Oh shit, it's a trick. I want our president in that bunker, and I want to discuss a damn thing of her till that becomes reality.
The military has just told us they have assumed condition Delta, which is the highest level we have been at since 9/11.
Having this one right after the first one, which is one of the best ones, was the worst whiplash I've ever experienced in my life. The Fallen is the strongest among his fellow primes, but because he hates humanity, he wants to use MacGuffins 1 and 2 to blow up the sun. And not just any sun, but all the suns. Because this movie was written by a fucking 10-year-old.
By destroying suns.
It's getting ready to blow up our sun.
And they set out into the universe seeking distant suns. Now I claim your sun.
So the Primes, who are the only ones in the universe who are strong enough to defeat the Fallen, decided that their best course of action is to kill themselves to hide the MacGuffin. Sam Witwicky,
It's Witwicky.
finds MacGuffin number 3 conveniently stuck to his jacket. He touches it, and through infinite space wisdom, or some random bullshit, he himself becomes MacGuffin number 4, and he will be used to guide everyone to MacGuffin number 2. The Decepticons take MacGuffin number 5 to bring Megatron back to life. Optimus fucking dies and becomes MacGuffin number 6. The final act is the Decepticons trying to steal MacGuffin number 2 to activate MacGuffin number 1, while MacGuffin number 4 uses MacGuffin number 2 to revive MacGuffin number 6 and destroy MacGuffin number 1.
Shut the fuck up.
If you want to punch me in the face because of how many times I said the word MacGuffin,
Do it.
but I gotta speed this up because we are actually getting to the real sauce. If anything ever came out of this barren wasteland of fun, it was actually a couple of things. Shockwave was pretty cool in this movie, and having him be the eyes and ears of the rest of the Decepticons was a super neat idea, because at least for the first trilogy, the Decepticons actually feel like a real threat. They render the military next to useless when they're actually using their skills to one-up the good guys. And this is one of the most creative ways that I've seen them do that in the entire series. But by far, the best Decepticon in the movie is the Devastator. Boy, does this thing go nuts. John Turturro is a treat. More so in this one than in the first one, but I really had a blast every time he was on screen. Lennox is also a super cool character, and I think the bond that him and his men have with the Autobots is nothing short of truly patriotic. Last and most certainly not least, the best thing that came out of this movie was that one scene where Optimus Prime goes fucking berserk.
You'll never stop at one. I'll take you all on!
Transformers 2 was certainly one of the Transformers movies of all time. Possibly the top 10 worst scripts I have ever seen in my life, coupled with a few short bursts of actual fun, earning its spot at number 5. Where to even begin with Dark of the Moon? The final cut to the official Transformers trilogy that may not have been well received at release, but considering what we got after, certainly made them look like Lord of the Rings. Dark of the Moon was a huge upgrade to any other sequel that we had in the Transformers universe. So you may be asking yourself, why is this placed at number 4? Because watching 8 straight hours of Michael Bay had me feeling about as sane as Norman Bates. In a week or so, I'll probably change my mind because Dark of the Moon was actually a pretty cool movie. I mean, that intro of NASA really did tickle my pickle and really reminded me of what a shocking event that was, even though it was all faked. And Buzz Aldrin looking like just a sweet, confused old man will live rent-free in my head until the day I die. What I will never forgive Michael Bay for is being such a brat and firing Megan Fox. Even though production hadn't technically started yet, this time they actually already had a finished script. So they couldn't write anything new, so what they did instead is they replaced Michaela with Carly. This relationship makes no sense within the context of this universe. Sam spent the entire last movie just getting the balls to tell Michaela that he loved her, only for Michael Bay to just axe her at the 11th hour.
I lied.
Anyway, remember when the Autobots bombed Iraq?
So now we assist our allies in solving human conflicts.
The Autobots in this movie, to me, are the best in the franchise. At this point in the story, they have a really strong relationship with the military, where they trust each other, go on missions, and destroy the Middle East stability.
We're giving you freedom!
And the fact that Lennox and his men sort of really empathize with Sam and B and Optimus is really cool, and far better of a dynamic from what the franchise turned into, where everyone hates the Autobots, even the Autobots. Although I wasn't a big fan of the designs, at least for the Decepticons. Like the sharp edges and triangularity was really getting old. Mostly because I couldn't really keep up with what they were even supposed to be now. I just felt that at any point, any of the Decepticons were gonna start making out with Angelina Jolie. And the Autobots entered this territory of really bizarre human faces that was just super creepy. Beyond the faces though, they were actually pretty handsome.
All right, I love you. Sleep good, handsome man.
The betrayal with Sentinel is not something that I saw coming, especially when Optimus hands the Matrix of Leadership to Sentinel and Sentinel rejects it because now Optimus is the leader of the Autobots. My brain tells me this was manufactured as fuck, but my heart tells me, who cares? This is pretty cool. Speaking of cool, holy The Decepticons in this movie go so bananas on Chicago. They just make a goddamn fortress in the middle of the United States and kill somewhere around 130,000 people. The devastation feels so devastating, even though they don't technically show any blood, at least not human. They show so much death and still somehow manage to get away with that PG-13 rating. Once again, I don't really like the relationship that they went with to replace Megan Fox, but Sam was about as cool as Sam can be. At least he wasn't nuking my ears like the last movie. Optimus! 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 Overall, I had a great time. Would watch again, 10 out of 10, would smash. Earning Transformers Dark of the Moon a super solid number 4. The next one might surprise you because I legitimately did not know that this movie existed until now. Transformers Rise of Beasts did not perform really good at the box office. However, what it did perform in is it gave us a nice little bow to sort of tie off the series. God, I hope so. Genius! Noah was a great protagonist with a lot of personality. The bond he shares with his brother is really something. I also really like how Noah is sort of a spiritual blend between Kate Yeager and Sam Witwicky, where he's a geek and he doesn't really fit in, but he also has a lot of drive, and when the time comes, he rises to the challenge and steps up to fight. Which was a massive relief that we didn't go back to this. And I was a huge fan of how they finally decided to switch it up from Bumblebee. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Bee, but it just felt like such a huge breath of fresh air to get a new buddy dynamic in the franchise. And the overall group dynamic is really awesome. This one, more than any other, the Autobots actually feel like a real family, which is a huge improvement from the bottomless pit of Michael Bay's illegal cockfighting. There is actually a scene in the movie where the family dynamic shines the brightest, and it's when they kill some cops. For what it's worth, I'm not really a huge fan of Pete Davidson. Well, aside from the fact that he has a pretty good track record. But I've never really found him to be particularly funny, which is why it was such a huge surprise when Mirage was actually kind of entertaining. Sometimes.
Stranger danger! Stranger danger!
Another great aspect, possibly the best, is the soundtrack. This playlist is so cold, it makes Drake look like the Island Boys.
Clear the way! Clear the way! Hi, kids.
I had a lot of fun with this music and was constantly spamming my Shazam, just like in another movie that we'll be talking about pretty soon. However, a really bad aspect is the special effects and the color palette. Man, this shit is so gray. Endgame is rolling in its grave right now. The special effects really don't help out, especially during the day, which is most of the goddamn movie. Just like me, this movie looks pretty good during the nighttime, but look at it during the daylight and you'll want to carve your eyes out. And just like Endgame, the final fight takes place in the cloudiest day possible and is still not the darkest day these towers will ever see. I assume the main reason for this is because they switched animation studios. And you can tell this is not what we're used to in a Transformers movie. And this makes me want to go back and apologize to Michael Bay for ever criticizing his saturation. Scourge was an alright villain. Just like this movie, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't necessarily great. The Maximals, or Beasts, were something that I definitely wanted to see more of, but just like in any of the other Transformers, you're never gonna actually see what you paid to come see. The only ones we really get from the Maximals are the Eagle Lady and Optimus Primal. The rest of the Maximals just kind of fuck off until the final fight. Overall, I think this movie was perfectly decent, and if, God forbid, this were to be the end of the franchise, I would be okay with that.
It's the way it is, you know? Everything must come to an end. The drip finally stops.
See you on the other side.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
Earning it a thickly, bubbly number 3 on the list. Despite whatever you think the next movie is gonna be, you might be wrong, because the runner-up for number 2 is Transformers 1. I know. But hear me out. Transformers 1 is the most rewatchable one. It's in fact the one that I have seen the most. Mainly because of how alien it seems to be to any other Transformers that we would get now. Back in 2007, movies like these were meant to target a very specific demographic. Fast cars, big butts, robots, explosions, dopamine. Anyone who did not like Modern Warfare 2 certainly did not like Transformers. The military is the main highlight in the movie. While I do realize that this is the most blatant and unapologetic gawk double twist 3000 that the military-industrial complex has ever seen. And I love every single second of it.
We need air support, and we need it now. Roll in strike package Bravo on unknown target. I authenticate Tango Whiskey at time 0300 Zulu.
Attention all aircraft. This will be a danger close fire mission.
Weapons, I just get a call from Falcon Ops. Who's closer to kill box 1 Alpha?
Send the Hawks, sir.
Okay, send the Hawks over to kill box 1 Alpha. It's a danger close at 300 feet.
Kill box 1 Alpha, 300 feet danger close.
Release in the area.
The military just feels like such a powerhouse against the Decepticons. Even though the Decepticons overpower them so goddamn much, they still feel like they could really go down swinging. All the meetings, orders, and fight scenes of the military feel like it's really happening, which is such a shame when you consider what the franchise turned into later, which was a bunch of Matrix ripoffs just riding around in off-road caddies. Not nearly as exciting though, we get Samuel Wiki.
It's Witwicky.
He's a pretty decent protagonist. Despite him being a bit of a loser, he's not some pushover like he would be in any other movie. Sam really starts to shine after he meets Bumblebee, and they have such a good dynamic in the first one that would only serve to solidify that friendship in the rest of the movies. You know, at least until he f***ing dies. And just like I'd mentioned before, boy does Michael Bay like to fuck around with the saturation settings. I cannot figure out who makes a better Donald Trump impression, John Turturro or Mark Wahlberg. Another fun thing that Michael Bay loves to do is spread little Tinkerbell nukes all over the screen. This shit might be the only thing that makes the special effects look unrealistic. Like everything is just blowing up exactly how a Transformer would. The humor is also at the peak of the franchise. And no, that was not sarcasm. Given the militaristic and serious tone of the film, it really gave these comedic scenes time to shine. Like that scene where the Autobots are just rolling around in Sam Witwicky's backyard and the parents think it's an earthquake is just so funny. Another funny guy was John Turturro. And I promise this is the last time I bring him up. Although, like I said before, I did like him better in the second movie because, I don't know, I just didn't really buy the whole government agent shtick. Maybe a few scenes could have been axed for the sake of the runtime, but overall, I don't really have a lot of negatives. This movie certainly earns its rightful place at number 2.
Bumblebee
is the final movie on the list, officially making it number 1, baby. Bumblebee is my favorite movie of the franchise because of how unique it was. It took all the mistakes out of every single movie before and only kept what made them great. You can tell that everyone who worked on this project put so much heart and soul into it, and it was incredibly contagious. So B has to flee Cybertron after the Autobots start getting their cheeks clapped by the Decepticons. And holy Christ on a cracker, that first scene on Cybertron was peak filmmaking. I love all the designs for the Autobots and the Decepticons that, just like Gladiator, return home to the classic look of the 80s series. Speaking of, I am super glad that we're getting Transformers 1 this year, where we're finally gonna be able to see the great Cybertron battle. Cannot wait. Anyway, he lands on Earth in 1987, where he meets Charlie, our main protagonist. And, yuck.
1, she's a female. 2, she's not a boy. And 3, and most importantly, she's a girl!
Charlie is a 6 in the 80s, but a 10 in 2024. She very recently lost her father, and with him, a part of herself. She feels lost and finds Bumblebee, where he becomes the spark that brings meaning back into her life. Something to care about again. This friendship is the best we've seen in the franchise. Yes, even better than Sam Witwicky. As short as this dynamic was, to me it felt like the most impactful one in the series. However, these two do not hold a candle to the best duo that we see in the movie, the Decepticons. Despite there only being 2.5 Decepticons in the plot, they are by far the most memorable ones we've seen. And for the first time ever, they actually live up to their names and deceive anybody. In this case, the US military. And the fact that they can turn into an aircraft and a car was just the cherry on top. There's not really a whole lot of spectacle in this one, and there really doesn't need to be. No world-ending events, sky beams, just a girl and her car fighting against these two chuckle nuts. And when the scales are reduced, sort of like this, it really gives the story time to flourish naturally, instead of just having like 87 MacGuffins and the plot just fly to you at light speed. The overall family dynamic was pretty well executed. Just like in Beasts, the human characters feel like real people and not some rich kid in the suburbs. Or... John Cena continues his long-standing tradition of being incredibly enjoyable on screen. He doesn't necessarily make or break the plot, but whenever he was in a scene, I had a lot of fun. The only negative that I have is this isn't as rewatchable as 1 or 3, but for what we got, I think it was a damn good time. And Bumblebee earned his rightful place carrying the franchise as #1. Let me know in the comments if you agree with the list or if you think I'm a total idiot, or both. Make sure to check out the latest video on the channel where I spread some Helldiver mayhem. Also, be sure to hit that big red button underneath so you don't miss a single update on the channel, as well as check out any of the other content that is all ready for you to watch. We have trailer reactions, gameplay, movie reviews, you name it, ton of variety down there. Make sure to check it out. But thank you guys so very much for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Ah, son of a bitch!